We all know farming has changed. With new and ever-advancing technologies, American farming and ranching doesn't look like it used to. Across the country, in operations big and small, we're making choices that help keep agriculture sustainable for your grandchildren and ours. Our values are the same. We grow crops and raise livestock and poultry so you can raise families that are happy and healthy. And thanks to innovations in agriculture, we're feeding more people with fewer resources. With innovation come questions, and we're here with answers. So let's talk. From basic terminology so you can speak the same language and ask the right questions, to complex topics like environmental impact and GMOs. Food dialogues exist to provide answers to your questions about food, straight from the people who produce it. So get to know who we are, how we work, and why we love what we do.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined this week by Agri-Pulse's Sara Wyant, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And you might notice we have a bit of a different backdrop this time around. Things look a little bit different. We figured for the first time this week, Sara and I would enjoy the California sunshine because throughout the rest of the week, we have been in this building just next to us covering the Commodity Classic. We've been very busy covering a number of issues. One that has really particularly dominated conversation here in Anaheim, California, was stances and discussions surrounding the Renewable Fuel Standard.
Absolutely. That's been the big buzz throughout Commodity Classic, where we have growers, thousands of growers representing corn, soybean, sorghum, and wheat, all coming together. They've had their delegate sessions, but the thing that got the farmers most excited was some of the news coming out of Washington about what was and what wasn't happening on the Renewable Fuel Standard, especially as it pertained to Secretary Perdue's support or his opinions on what should happen in terms of a solution during meetings at the White House. And Spencer, I'd have to say that of all the people talking about any media, your story that we had in Wednesday's newsletter was really the heart of that story on how the administration was dealing with the search for a solution between refiners and the biofuels industry.
Right, and there seemed to be a lot of conversation based on that story and really the broader subject as a whole. And right now, our story surfaced really late Tuesday evening on some revelations that the National Corn Growers Association, not exactly thrilled the way they saw it with the stance being taken by Sonny Perdue, Ag Secretary, of course, behind some closed doors. And they were looking for some answers as to why the Secretary of Agriculture was not, in their mind, adequately supporting the Renewable Fuel Standard. Secretary Perdue comes to Commodity Classic and not quite refutes the reports, but does maintain his support of the Renewable Fuel Standard.
Strongly
supported the Renewable Fuel Standard and explained his stance on what he sees as things that need to happen with the RINs market, the Renewable Identification Numbers market. And now at this point, the National Corn Growers Association President Kevin Skunis tells me in a video that's also posted on agripulse.com that they are appreciative of the Secretary's support of the RFS, but right now they're in the process of trying to get him to understand their perspective on the RINs issue. They believe that they have him in their corner on the broader issue of the Renewable Fuel Standard, but when it comes to the particulars of the RINs market, they're working to try and do some education, so to speak, on how they see the issue. And that's been a real focal point of this entire RFS and RINs debate, is what to do about the RINs market. The refiners, led by Senators Ted Cruz and Pat Toomey, are arguing for a cap on RINs costs, those compliance costs with the Renewable Fuel Standard. And those are some things, Sara, that we're hearing have come up in a number of meetings at the White House this week, one on Tuesday and one today on Thursday, discussing ways to potentially resolve this biofuel stalemate. And Sara, some interesting commentary that we're getting out of this Thursday meeting.
Absolutely. You know, the Secretary said today that he thinks this White House has been more engaged with agriculture than any other administration. And it really was borne out today with the President spending an hour in the room with refinery interests, with biofuels interests, with the four senators that you mentioned, Senators Grassley, Toomey, Cruz, as they're all talking about this. And we just got a readout, Spencer, from folks who were privy to those discussions. And the biofuel interests were almost shocked during that discussion with the president when they said he was so engaging, he was so concerned about corn farmers, he was excited to know that there's corn grown in almost every state of the United States, and they started talking about what they really needed was year-round E15. And the president said, "What's E15?" And once they talked about it, he said, "That's a solution." He thought that was really exciting. So the folks that we talked to were very optimistic that the president certainly wants to support farmers, wants to support agriculture, but he does want a solution. He wants to have more data. The secretary said that as well today. Let's have some economic analysis, which we know USDA has had plenty of over the past few years. And so there's a speculation that there'll be another meeting on this next week and that there could possibly be a compromise that all sides could like.
So if this issue is any indication, there was probably news that broke as Sarah and I were sitting down here and discussing the matter. There's probably some earth-shaking revelation that has happened since we sat down. And so we will be sure to keep you up to date on the RFS and the RINs debate issue on agripulse.com as close to up to the seconds as we can provide you, depending, of course, upon the gathering of news and information from the reliable sources that we've come to trust. And so a very developing, a very, pardon my pun, fluid situation here in the renewable fuels situation.
And there's been a lot more news in addition to that, of course, with the announcement of the tariffs on steel and aluminum that has got this commodity classic also buzzing about what that could possibly mean for agriculture.
Right, and this one is particularly of more interest to perhaps the soybean and sorghum growers that are here in attendance, really concerned about potential retaliation specifically from China if in the event that these tariffs are actually implemented. It's important to note the president this week did not actually set these tariffs into action. He merely said that he was going to. And so is there room for negotiation and convincing to prevent him from actually imposing these tariffs? That remains to be seen. He said he is looking to take action over the course of the next week. But these tariffs of 25 and 10% on steel and aluminum really have the attention of, as Sarah mentioned, have the attention of a number of the commodity groups here in attendance, concerned about retaliation, specifically when it comes to soybean and sorghum. Now they're just looking to see what's going to happen on this. When do we actually see some changes and see, as I see the sun goes down and we lose a lot of our backlighting. Hopefully you all can still see us, but we can see a lot of potential retaliation coming should the Chinese government decide to impose it.
That's always the big question. Whenever there's a sort of a tariff spat, agriculture is an easy hit for a lot of countries. And so I think everybody has remembered what's happened in the past and certainly fearful of what could happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. So that's a conversation and a discussion that we will be sure to follow here on agripulse.com, and we'll be sure to keep you abreast of any developments that we see on that and many other of the foreign policy issues that we follow in Washington, D.C., and Anaheim, California, and across the country this time of year, as it certainly is agricultural conference season. But I think that's going to do it for this week. Be sure to keep an eye on agripulse.com for the very rapid-firing developments here on a number of foreign policy issues. But for Sara Wyant, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.